Wholesalers, I got something to tell you before we start the show. If you're thinking about employing a scheduler, I want to make you aware of an awesome opportunity. Wholesaler Masterminds Schedulers has an offer for you exclusively as a listener of the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. It's 50% off, 50% off a 3-month prepay. If you want more information about the 50% off offer, go to Wholesaler Masterminds, find Wholesaler Masterminds Schedulers, and call Melanie or email Melanie. Tell her you heard about it right here on the show. Now, as far as today's show goes, there's lots to be concerned about today, whether it's the economy or client fears in the form of our advisor or client fears in the form of the advisor's clients, the regulatory environment that is shifting, the new political climate that we'll be headed into. There's all kinds of reasons to have your mind jostled about in an unproductive and negative way. And that's why I'm 100% certain that our guest for you today will be insightful and informative. Welcome to the only podcast on the planet dedicated to exploring the art, science, and lifestyle of wholesalers and their leaders. This is the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. I'm your host, the founder of Wholesaler Masterminds, Rob Shore. Wholesalers, welcome back to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. Wholesalers, we've brought in clinical guests for you today. We have Dr. Jack Singer. He's both a professional speaker and a professional sports psychologist. For 20 years, he's brought the skills he teaches to world-class athletes to financial sales professionals. Today, we're going to get under the hood of 7 simple steps to quickly ignite mental toughness and build resiliency. Dr. Jack Singer, welcome to the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show.
Well, Rob, it's certainly my pleasure, and I'm excited for your listeners to be able to learn some tips that they can put to use immediately.
That's fantastic, because we need those actionable things. So let's start to pick apart the 7 simple steps. Hit me with the first one.
Okay, well, again, this is going to be the same kinds of simple steps to mental toughness that I've provided for world-class athletes for more than 20 years, and I've adapted it for financial professionals. And it's exactly the same mentality. You know, in your introduction, you talked about some of the challenges that wholesalers are facing these days, but none of those challenges cause stress. Stress is caused by what you say to yourself about those challenges. So if it's regulatory challenges, what are you saying? Are you saying, I'm overwhelmed, I can't do this? That's what causes the stress. And my mental toughness skills are the ability to grind through these things and teach you to change your thinking so that it no longer will cause stress. Do you follow what I'm saying, Rob?
I do. Haven't you written, and don't you speak about the notion that in your work, you can have 2 athletes with exactly the same skill set, the techniques and experience, but they separate themselves when it comes to the mental toughness piece. Isn't that directly from some of your learnings?
That's exactly correct. Let's take 2 Olympic athletes. I recently worked with a gold medal winner from the Olympics. What separated that athlete from the person who got the silver medal? They have the same techniques, they have the same knowledge, they have the same experience. The only difference is one of them is more distracted by mental issues than the other one. So you can actually look at a formula, Rob, for any athlete or any wholesaler or any sales professional, and that is their performance will always equal their talent plus their knowledge minus distractions. So if we can keep the distractions at a minimal, and the distractions are negative thoughts that go through your mind, worries, fears, statements that start with what if, for example, always will follow a negative path. Those are the things that tighten someone up and cause them not to perform to where their true potential lies.
You know, I know we have an intent of getting through these simple steps, but what you just talked about is super important. How do I keep those voices at bay? How do I tamp down the impulse to want to listen to that noise? Because we all have the noise every single damn day, Doc. How do we tamp it down?
Well, that's where the 7 steps come in. So let's get right into the 7 steps. And you can do the 7 steps, by the way, in less than 5 minutes. So this is not some laborious thing that people have to do. In fact, most athletes that I've used this with tell me that while other people are listening to music before the game or the event, they're going over Dr. Jack's 7 steps, and they find it to be extremely important, and they can go through it very quickly. So step number 1 is you need to recognize the negative trigger thoughts that cause your stress. I'll give you an example. I'm worried that I will never be able to deal with all of the changes in my industry, and I'll have to look for another career. If a wholesaler says that to him or herself, that's going to tighten them up, not just physically, but mentally, and that's where the stress comes from. So once you recognize the trigger thoughts, the thoughts that have led to these problems, then you can move on to step number 2. Do you have any questions about number 1, Rob?
Yeah. So recognizing negative trigger thoughts, how do we label them? And what I mean by that, Dr. Jack, is you could say that all thoughts that start to cause me stress are negative in nature. How do we separate the ones that are heading me down that path of triggering all that badness? Do you follow me? In other words, is it just this large ocean of negative thoughts? Got to keep all them to the side, or are there specific triggers I'm supposed to be on the lookout for?
I actually wrote a book about this, and there are 10 key areas of negative thinking. One of them, for example, is catastrophizing. If you're thinking of something that's going to lead to a catastrophe, that's a trigger thought. Like, what if I have to find a new career? Would be a catastrophic thought. It's taking a little piece of information that bothers you and blowing it out of proportion to the point where you're so worried that you're going to have to give up on your career. Another one is mind reading, deciding what a potential client may be thinking about you, and it's negative. So there's many simple ways that people can immediately start to understand when they're going off the deep end and that kind of thinking, and that's when they have to stop it immediately.
Okay, that helped a lot. So let's go to number 2.
So number 2 is, and you'll get a chuckle out of this, but it really works. The kind of rubber band that the male comes in is called a number 64 rubber band. It's kind of a fat rubber band. Everyone should have one on their wrist, sitting loosely on their wrist. And as soon as they recognize that a trigger thought is beginning, do not let it finish. Snap the rubber band. And at the same time, say to yourself, stop the silly thinking. Now, because thoughts are habits and they continue over and over, the thought may want to keep coming in there. You have to keep snapping away. Eventually, your subconscious mind will not want to feel that little pain of the rubber band snapping, and it will stop the thought dead in its tracks. So that is step number 2.
All right, wait, before we go to number 3, I have to speak for any of the skeptics and naysayers out there. Dr. Jack, does that really work? I mean, I'm gonna beat the crap out of my wrist with a rubber band, and subconsciously it'll eventually trigger the notion that I should stop thinking those thoughts.
That's correct. And if you do it enough and you're consistent, it will definitely stop. You'll be catching yourself before the thought gets halfway through after that, and you'll immediately stop it, which is the goal. So you're trying to condition your subconscious mind to stop these kinds of thoughts. Thoughts that start with what if, for example, are almost always leading down the road to some negativity, or I hope I don't, or I'm worried about this, or I should have done that. These are the kinds of thoughts that always lead to stress. So once you recognize them, you snap the rubber band to stop them.
Wholesalers, I think we should actually go get ourselves some rubber bands, and maybe you want to put the company logo on it and hand out to your advisors during DOL. It's just a thought. Doc, what's number 3?
That's very, very clever, and that's true. Now, you need to now calm yourself down from the activity that started with the negative thought in the first place. So what I have as step number 3 is what I call a centering breath. And this is the kind of breathing that elite athletes learn how to do through their diaphragm. Musicians learn how to do this, who have to have a deep volume of breath, singers and so forth. But here's the easiest way to learn it. You take a deep breath in through your nose to the count of 4, then you hold it for 4 seconds, and then a big exhale out your mouth to the count of 7. The key here is that they're breathing in and their stomach is expanding because it's pushing the diaphragm out, and when they breathe out, their stomach contracts. People can learn to do that. It's easy. You can do it while you're sitting at your desk with your hands folded over your stomach, and when it starts happening, you'll be able to do it automatically. That's the fastest way to calm yourself down. So that step is taking a few deep centering breaths.
I love the fact that these are so actionable so quickly, just as an aside. Because so you're right. I mean, this isn't about me reading a 300-page book and going to an off-site seminar. This is very helpful. So go with number 4, Jack.
Okay. Now, next we have what we call a performance statement, which every wholesaler should construct for him or herself. A performance statement is a statement about what it takes to give you maximum success in performing your best against your competition. So an athlete, for example, would have a performance statement. Let's say it's a baseball player, and the baseball player is worrying about his batting. The performance statement might be, when I'm in the batter's box, I make sure my feet are centered the way they need to be. I focus on the release point from the pitcher. I look at the spin on the ball. That's how that person's going to be in the best position to get a hit. When it's an advisor or a wholesaler in particular, I have an example. Every day I remind myself that my goal is not perfection. All I have to do is become a good listener, and there are ways to learn how to do that, and understand the challenges that my clients face with their clients, and I will be able to help them to find the right solutions for those clients. Quotas and getting the attention of advisors will not be an issue for me as long as I have the advisor's key concerns always at the top of my mind. I use my new mental toughness skills to control my attitude, regardless of quotas, regardless of complaints that I get, because my attitude is the critical difference in the process of selling my products. Now, that's a long-winded one. It doesn't have to be that long. But the point I'm trying to make is that the wholesaler needs to think about the specifics of his or her job that leads to success, and that's the performance statement.
So, Dr. Jack, where do I put the performance statement? Is it as I'm brushing my teeth first thing out of bed? Is it,
Yeah, you should. That's a really good question. You ask superb questions, Rob. Probably why you're in this business. Yes, these things should be written down. You can have one on your mirror at home to be reading. You can have one in the car to read before you start the car, and you can have one at work. The more you repeat the performance statement, the more you can summarize it to yourself without needing a card to look at. But the performance statement always has to be remembered, because when people are challenged and they're tempted to go off into this negative thinking, they need to remember, I've learned how to be an excellent listener. There's something I teach wholesalers and advisors called active empathic listening. You can look that up, and you can learn the steps to being an active empathic listener. And that skill alone will overcompensate for any negativity that's coming your way from clients or potential clients. So these are things that the wholesaler can learn how to do and remember that they have those skills, so that it'll diffuse those challenge thoughts that come their way.
Wholesalers, it's a good opportunity to remind you something that Dr. Jack just said, which is his availability to work with your team at a divisional meeting, a national sales meeting, to work with your advisors at complex meetings, at broker-dealer events, at their national sales conferences, etc. For more information about that, you'll want to go to wmmspeakers.com, or go to the Wholesaler Masterminds website and check that out. I got a question about the performance statement, because I'm curious, in your work with professional athletes, what's the most succinct, this puts you on the spot, what's the most succinct and powerful performance statement? I want both, because the one that you read us, as you acknowledged, was rather long, somewhat tedious, no less impactful, I'm sure, but long and tedious nonetheless. What's the most succinct and powerful performance statement you've heard a professional athlete use?
Well, the one I gave you about baseball players is pretty succinct. It's, what do I do with my feet? Where do I watch for the release point of the pitcher? And what do I look for in the spin of the ball? That performance statement, and when you add to it, I will be able to do this each time, then that athlete is now in position to be focused on the pitch instead of worrying about moving the runner over, what is my coach going to say, and those other distraction kinds of thoughts that get in the way of performance.
Okay, I appreciate that. So let's go on to number 5.
Now I tell the wholesaler to recall their greatest success. It's sort of a personal highlight reel, a video in their mind that they can recall their greatest success, and it's not necessarily on the job. It could have been success as an athlete, or it could have been as an actor in high school or college. It could have been making the debate team. It doesn't matter. What was your greatest success? And the reason I want the wholesaler to think about that is because as they visualize it, it actually removes a lot of the tension that started with these triggering thoughts, because they realize I have had some interesting successes in life and I can repeat it again with my current job. So I want them to recall their greatest success. The Seattle Seahawks coach Pete Carroll does this with his players at halftime of games. He wants them to recall their greatest success, not in football necessarily, but some other time in their life, and share it with each other, because that gets their mind onto succeeding rather than focusing on what they're worried about happening in the game that's taking place right now.
Is it your suggestion that a wholesaler, any professional that's using your prescription here of 7 steps, am I using all of them, or are they inclusive? Do I need to implement all 7 to get the maximum effect, or can I include and exclude certain of the 7 and still walk away with a meaningful impact?
That's a really insightful question that I've really never been asked before, interestingly. And I addressed that question in my book, The Financial Advisor's Ultimate Stress Mastery Guide. The answer is, once you've memorized how to do this, which doesn't take long, you can take shortcuts to use whatever works fastest for you. For example, the breathing part I mentioned. Sometimes people, once they learn how to do that, after they snap the rubber band, they're automatically doing these deep centering breathing. They don't have to think about it. They may not even want to go through their performance statement. They want to recall the highlight reel of a success. And it brings all of these other steps to mind and brings the end result of it to mind, so you don't actually have to go through every step in the order that I've given them.
So it sounds like of course, more than the suggestion, the recommendation is, wholesalers, we're going to start with all 7, but upon perfecting the 7, you'll be able to potentially choose other stopping points within the 7 and still have the same net effect, which is good to know, because if you're like me, you may not think that you'll always have time for all 7, even though the sum total of time taken is not great, but it still sounds like a lot. What's number 6, Dr.
So
Jack?
7 sounds overwhelming,
Yep.
but it really doesn't have to be that way. It could be 4 steps. It's whatever works the fastest and the best for you.
Yeah.
But these are the 7 steps to pick and choose from.
That's awesome. What's number 6?
Next is an identity statement. This is not the same as a performance statement. An identity statement is actually throwing modesty out the window and asking yourself, what is the greatest strength I currently have, or what is the greatest strength I'd like to have? What is my goal? What do I ultimately want to accomplish? And you put these 2 things, your current strength and what you want to accomplish, you frame it as though these things have already been accomplished. So, for example, I am the most conscientious and motivated sales professional in my firm. I am proud of the fact that I can really help my clients to help their clients to feel financially safe, and I'm enthusiastic in promoting my products to my clients. So that's a statement of where the person would like to be, or in some cases they think they already are, which is good, but modesty's thrown out the window, and you really build yourself up to your ultimate. And that is a key part of the whole mental toughness thing, because it takes away from all the fear and anxiety, and you tell yourself, I can really do this.
I'm thinking about you heard the silence. It was me thinking about all the different applications for where that would come in particularly handy. So I'm tracking with you on the identity statement.
Absolutely. Let's use an example of myself before I spoke to you. Now, I hadn't reviewed any other interviews you did. I have no information other than you're going to spend a certain amount of time with me. And if I was going to go through mental toughness before chatting with you on this interview, Rob, my identity statement would be something like, I have done many successful interviews in the past. There's nothing about this that's going to challenge me anymore. I can't wait to get to this interview because I have so much important information to impart to Rob's listeners. There's an identity statement that talks about goals and what I know I can accomplish. And at the same time, it's blocking out any negative thoughts like, What if I don't know how to answer a question would be a potential negative thought. Or what if there's a long silence and I don't know how to fill it in? So you see what I'm saying?
That's
I give myself an identity statement that's going to really set me on the right path.
That's a great example. Wholesalers, the one that I was thinking of, the rattling around my brain, was, whenever you've had a chance to go visit, say, a corner office advisor, and maybe you've got that, just that niggling little feeling that they're better than you, or they're more successful than you, or you won't be able to share information that will be able to earn their business, or anything else that is going to have a injurious effect on that conversation. Because, by the way, in my opinion, Dr. Jack, I'd like to get yours. They'll read that. They'll read the insecurity. They'll read something in your mannerism or your voice or your inflection. They'll pick up on something that is your quote unquote weakness. And so this identity statement becomes quite pivotal in some respects. Did I get that piece right about them reading it, Dr. Jack?
Yeah, and it's pivotal that they do that right before that sales call, because the last thing before the sales call needs to be something that's calming and motivating, not something that's worrying you or frightening you, because it'll come out in your voice. It'll come out in your eye contact. And so you really want to be confident, overconfident. Remember, modesty goes out the window. This is not a place for you to be modest. This is a place for you to say, I can be a champion, and I'm going to demonstrate it right now. And another thing they can say is, if this doesn't result in a sale, I just move on to my next opportunity. End of story.
Yeah, that's obviously a great way to address the constant rejection that we get. No just means not yet, as one of our millionaire wholesalers said. Let's go to number 7, Dr. Jack.
Well, the last one is another centering breath. So we've anchored the beginning and the end of this with calming, relaxing breathing, so that they take place early on and it takes place at the end to put the exclamation point on the whole mental toughness routine. I am calm and I am relaxed and I'm ready to go.
The benefits of this are abundantly clear. Now, in some of the notes that I had, and I'm guessing as we had our pre-conversation, wholesalers, the 7 steps were brand new to me. I hadn't heard them before and I love them. The net results then, correct me if I'm wrong, the net results here, Dr. Jack, is you get to overcome number 1, fears preventing peak performance. You get to bounce back from setbacks quickly. This whole routine you're suggesting, as you said earlier, this is sum total maybe 5 minutes. Is that right?
That's right. You can do this very quickly. And I use it with high school athletes. I mean, you don't have to be sophisticated to do this. You just make it a habit to practice it, and it works beautifully. And yes, how do I bounce back quickly from setbacks instead of staying zoned in on the setback, which will affect the next sales call I make, where I'll start to worry, what if this happens again? Or what if I don't make another sale? Or what if I don't make my quota? When you're stuck on that, your brain locks everything up so that you tighten up, the same as an athlete would tighten up and not be able to perform fluidly when they're worried.
Wholesalers, I suspect that these 7 steps are going to come in quite handy for a whole host of reasons as you approach your next opportunities with financial advisors. Dr. Jack, thanks for your time. I know you're on the road, so I appreciate the knowledge that you shared, the depth of that knowledge, and you carving time out of your calendar.
It's my pleasure, Rob, anytime.
Wholesalers, come back next time for another episode of the new Wholesaler Masterminds radio show. You'll find all of our content at wholesalermasterminds.com, and the podcast can be found at iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play.